My husband sat across from me at our kitchen table and told me he wanted a divorce. He said he was keeping everything: the houses, the business, the cars, the investments. Everything except our son. What Vincent didn't know was that I'd been waiting 3 years for him to say those exact words, and I was going to let him have exactly what he asked for. If you've ever given everything to someone who made you feel like you were nothing, hit that like button right now. And if you love stories where the person who gets walked on finally gets to walk away with their head held high, subscribe and stick around, because this one's going to be worth it. My name is Alexis, and for 15 years, I was invisible. I met Vincent Mercer when I was 23 years old. He was charming, ambitious, and had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. He talked about building an empire. Real estate, he said, that's where the real money was. He had dreams bigger than anyone I'd ever met. And me, I believed in him. We got married after 2 years of dating. I was young and stupid and so deeply in love that I couldn't see the red flags waving right in front of my face. But back then, Vincent was different. Or maybe he was always the same, and I just didn't want to see it. When we started out, we had nothing. Vincent had a real estate license and a used Honda Civic. I had a degree in business administration and a small inheritance from my grandmother, about $60,000. Vincent convinced me to invest it into his first property deal. He promised we'd double it within a year. I said yes, because that's what you do when you love someone. That first deal worked out. We made money, and then we reinvested, and again and again. Within 5 years, Vincent had built a real estate portfolio worth over $2 million, properties all over the city, rental units, commercial spaces, a small empire, just like he promised. But here's what nobody ever talks about. I built that empire too. I didn't just support Vincent, I worked for him, unpaid. Every single day. I managed the books, I handled tenant complaints at 2 a.m, I scheduled repairs, negotiated with contractors, filed paperwork, and chased down late rent payments. I answered his phone when he was too busy. I smiled at his clients when he needed me to be charming. I hosted dinner parties for investors while 8 months pregnant. And I raised our son, Tyler, completely alone. Vincent was never home. He was always closing deals, meeting clients, networking at events I wasn't invited to. When Tyler took his first steps, Vincent was in another city. When Tyler said his first word, Vincent was on a golf course. When Tyler had his first nightmare and screamed for his father, I was the one who held him.
I did everything, and Vincent took everything. But I didn't complain. I told myself this was partnership, this was sacrifice, this was building something together. The cracks started showing around year 10. Vincent became colder, distant. He stopped saying thank you. He stopped asking about my day. He started criticizing everything I did, the way I dressed, the way I spoke, the way I handled his business calls. Nothing was ever good enough. His mother, Eleanor, made things worse. That woman hated me from the day we met. She thought I wasn't good enough for her precious son. She called me the help once at a family dinner. Vincent laughed. I should have left then, but I stayed. For Tyler, for the life I thought we were building. Then came the affair. I found out the way most wives do, a text message on his phone. Her name was Madison. She was 24 years old, a receptionist at one of his office buildings. The messages were explicit. The photos were worse. When I confronted Vincent, he didn't even apologize. He looked me dead in the eyes and said, "What did you expect, Alexis? You let yourself go. You're not the woman I married anymore." I stood there in our kitchen, shaking, tears streaming down my face, and he walked past me like I was furniture. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. Every memory replayed in my head, every sacrifice, every late night. every moment I chose him over myself. And something inside me cracked. Not broke, cracked. Because breaking means you fall apart. Cracking means something new starts to show through. The next morning, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront him again. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to start paying attention. And that's when I discovered the truth about Vincent's empire, the truth that would eventually destroy him. It started with a credit card statement that arrived at the house by mistake. It was addressed to Vincent, but it was from a bank I'd never heard of. The balance was over $70,000. I opened it, and what I found inside made my blood run cold.
That credit card statement was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, I became a detective in my own home. I waited until Vincent left for work, then I searched. His office, his filing cabinets, his laptop when he forgot to log out. I photographed everything. Bank statements, loan documents, tax returns he'd hidden from me for years. What I found was a nightmare. Vincent's empire wasn't an empire at all. It was a house of cards built on borrowed money and lies. He had taken out multiple mortgages on properties I thought we owned outright. He'd maxed out credit lines I didn't know existed. There were unpaid property taxes going back 3 years. And the worst part? I found records of wire transfers to a casino in Atlantic City, tens of thousands of dollars, again and again and again. My husband was a gambling addict, and he was drowning in almost $2 million of debt. The life we lived, the nice cars, the expensive dinners, the country club membership, all of it was fake. All of it was borrowed. We weren't rich, we were broke. We were worse than broke, and I had no idea. My hands shook as I sat on the floor of his office, surrounded by papers that proved everything I believed was a lie. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw things. I wanted to march into his office and demand answers. But I didn't, because in that moment, something shifted inside me. I realized that confronting Vincent would accomplish nothing. He'd lie, he'd gaslight me, he'd make me feel crazy for asking questions. That's what he always did. No, if I was going to survive this, I needed to be smart. I started making copies. Every document, every statement, every record of every debt he'd hidden. I stored them in a safety deposit box at a bank across town under my maiden name. Vincent never knew it existed. Then I called a lawyer, not a divorce lawyer, not yet, an estate attorney, someone who could help me protect what little I had left. Remember my grandmother's inheritance? That $60,000 I'd invested in Vincent's first deal? Over the years, my grandmother had left me more, a small retirement fund, some savings bonds. Nothing extravagant, but it was mine, separate property. Money Vincent had never touched because he didn't know it existed. The attorney helped me move everything into a trust for Tyler, untouchable, protected. No matter what happened, my son would be okay. And then I waited. 3 years. I waited 3 years. I know what you're thinking. 3 years? Why didn't you just leave? Because I wasn't ready, because I needed Vincent to make the first move, because I knew that if I filed for divorce, he'd fight me for everything. He'd claim I was abandoning him. He'd twist the narrative. He'd make me the villain.
But if he left me, if he demanded everything, then he'd be walking into his own trap. So I played the part of the dutiful wife. I smiled. I cooked dinner. I attended his events and stood by his side and pretended I didn't know about Madison or the gambling or the mountain of debt that grew larger every month. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. Some nights I'd lock myself in the bathroom and cry so hard I couldn't breathe. I'd stare at my reflection and not recognize the woman looking back at me. I'd imagine grabbing Tyler and running, just disappearing in the middle of the night. But I didn't. I stayed, and I watched. Vincent grew more reckless, more arrogant. He started bringing Madison to public events. He introduced her as his assistant, while I stood 3 feet away. His mother started making comments about how he deserved someone younger, someone more suitable. The humiliation was constant, and I swallowed every single drop of it. Then, one evening, my best friend Karen came over for coffee. We'd been friends for 20 years. I trusted her completely. But something about that conversation felt off. She kept asking strange questions. How was I handling things? Was I planning to leave Vincent? Did I have any money of my own? That night, I checked her social media, and there it was, a photo of Karen and Eleanor, Vincent's mother, having lunch together. My best friend was spying on me, reporting back to the Mercer family. I felt sick, physically sick. I barely made it to the bathroom before I threw up. Everyone was against me, my husband, his family, even my closest friend. But I didn't confront Karen. I didn't tip my hand. Instead, I started feeding her false information. I told her I was broke, that I had nothing, that I was terrified of the divorce because I'd be left with nothing. And she believed every word. 2 months later, Vincent came home from work with a bottle of champagne and a smile I hadn't seen in years. "Alexis," he said, pouring himself a glass, "we need to talk." My heart stopped. I want a divorce, and I'm keeping everything. The houses, the business, the cars, everything. He took a long sip of champagne. "You can have Tyler. I don't have time for a kid anyway." He said it so casually, like he was ordering lunch. I stared at him, and for the first time in 3 years, I had to fight to keep the smile off my face, because Vincent Mercer had just signed his own death warrant. The night Vincent asked for the divorce, I didn't sleep. But it wasn't because I was sad. It was because my mind was racing with everything I needed to do next. For 3 years, I had been preparing for this moment, collecting documents, building my case, protecting my assets, and now, finally, the game was about to begin. But I couldn't rush it. I couldn't let Vincent see even a flicker of satisfaction on my face. As far as he knew, I was devastated, broken, exactly what he expected me to be. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with red eyes, thanks to some carefully applied makeup and trembling hands. Vincent walked in, already dressed for work, and barely glanced at me. "I've already called my lawyer," he said, grabbing his keys. "He'll send over the papers. Don't make this difficult, Alexis. Just sign what we give you, and this will all be over quickly." I nodded, my voice small. "What about Tyler?" Vincent shrugged. "I told you, you can have him. I'll do weekends when I have time." When he had time, like our son was an optional appointment. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood, but I kept my face neutral, defeated. "Okay, Vincent," I whispered, "whatever you want." He smiled, that arrogant, self-satisfied smile I had grown to hate, and walked out the door. The moment his car pulled out of the driveway, I picked up my phone and called my lawyer. Not the estate attorney, a divorce attorney I'd been consulting with secretly for over a year. Her name was Patricia Chen, and she was brilliant. "He made the first move," I said. Patricia laughed softly. "Perfect. Let him think he's in control. We'll let him have exactly what he's asking for." The plan was simple, but it required precision. Vincent wanted all the assets, the properties, the business, the cars, the investments. He saw these things as his empire, his legacy, his proof that he was a success. What he didn't see, what he refused to acknowledge, was that every single one of those assets was drowning in debt. The properties had multiple mortgages, the business had outstanding loans, the cars were leased, not owned, the investments were leveraged to the breaking point. On paper, Vincent's empire looked impressive. In reality, it was a ticking bomb, and I was going to let him hold it when it exploded.
Patricia and I spent weeks preparing. We organized every document I'd collected over the past 3 years, every hidden credit card statement, every gambling debt, every unpaid tax bill. We created a complete picture of Vincent's financial disaster. But here's the key: we weren't going to reveal any of it. Not yet. Instead, we were going to let Vincent's own greed do the work for us. When his lawyer sent over the initial divorce papers, they were exactly what I expected. Vincent wanted everything. The proposal was laughably one-sided. He'd keep all marital assets, I'd get a small monthly alimony payment, barely enough to cover rent, and full custody of Tyler. His lawyer probably thought I'd fight, that I'd demand my fair share, that we'd enter a lengthy negotiation. But I didn't fight. I agreed.
The night Vincent asked for the divorce, I didn't sleep. But it wasn't because I was sad. It was because my mind was racing with everything I needed to do next. For 3 years, I had been preparing for this moment, collecting documents, building my case, protecting my assets, and now, finally, the game was about to begin. But I couldn't rush it. I couldn't let Vincent see even a flicker of satisfaction on my face. As far as he knew, I was devastated, broken, exactly what he expected me to be. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with red eyes, thanks to some carefully applied makeup, and trembling hands. Vincent walked in, already dressed for work, and barely glanced at me. "I've already called my lawyer," he said, grabbing his keys. "He'll send over the papers. Don't make this difficult, Alexis. Just sign what we give you and this will all be over quickly." I nodded, my voice small. "What about Tyler?" Vincent shrugged. "I told you, you can have him. I'll do weekends when I have time." When he had time, like our son was an optional appointment. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood, but I kept my face neutral, defeated. "Okay, Vincent," I whispered, "whatever you want." He smiled, that arrogant, self-satisfied smile I had grown to hate, and walked out the door. The moment his car pulled out of the driveway, I picked up my phone and called my lawyer. Not the estate attorney, a divorce attorney I'd been consulting with secretly for over a year. Her name was Patricia Chen, and she was brilliant. "He made the first move," I said. Patricia laughed softly. "Perfect. Let him think he's in control. We'll let him have exactly what he's asking for." The plan was simple, but it required precision. Vincent wanted all the assets, the properties, the business, the cars, the investments. He saw these things as his empire, his legacy, his proof that he was a success. What he didn't see, what he refused to acknowledge, was that every single one of those assets was drowning in debt. The properties had multiple mortgages, the business had outstanding loans, the cars were leased, not owned, the investments were leveraged to the breaking point. On paper, Vincent's empire looked impressive. In reality, it was a ticking bomb, and I was going to let him hold it when it exploded. Patricia and I spent weeks preparing. We organized every document I'd collected over the past 3 years, every hidden credit card statement, every gambling debt, every unpaid tax bill. We created a complete picture of Vincent's financial disaster. But here's the key: we weren't going to reveal any of it. Not yet. Instead, we were going to let Vincent's own greed do the work for us. When his lawyer sent over the initial divorce papers, they were exactly what I expected. Vincent wanted everything. The proposal was laughably one-sided. He'd keep all marital assets, I'd get a small monthly alimony payment, barely enough to cover rent, and full custody of Tyler. His lawyer probably thought I'd fight, that I'd demand my fair share, that we'd enter a lengthy negotiation. But I didn't fight. I agreed. I can still remember the look on Patricia's face when I told her my decision. She understood immediately. "You're letting him take the debt?" she said slowly, a smile spreading across her face. "Every penny of it. In divorce proceedings, assets and liabilities are divided. If Vincent wanted all the assets, he'd have to take all the liabilities too. And since he was so eager to claim everything as his, he was about to legally assume nearly $2 million in debt. The beautiful part? He had no idea.
Vincent was so arrogant, so convinced of his own success, that he never actually looked at the real numbers. He trusted his accountant, a man who had been cooking the books for years. He trusted his image, the successful businessman with the beautiful properties and the luxury lifestyle. He never trusted the truth. There was one moment when I almost lost everything. About a week before the final divorce hearing, Vincent showed up at the house unexpectedly. I was in his office, photographing some last-minute documents I needed for Patricia. I heard his car in the driveway. My heart nearly stopped. I shoved the papers back into the filing cabinet, closed my phone, and practically ran to the kitchen. By the time Vincent walked through the front door, I was standing at the counter, pretending to wash dishes. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his eyes narrowing. "Cleaning," I said, keeping my voice steady. "What are you doing here? I thought you had meetings all day." He stared at me for a long moment. I could feel his suspicion like a physical weight. My palms were sweating. My heart was pounding so loud I was sure he could hear it. Then he shrugged. "Forgot my golf clubs. The meeting got moved to the course." He grabbed the clubs from the hall closet and left without another word. I stood at that kitchen sink for 10 minutes, unable to move. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped a glass and it shattered on the floor. But I didn't stop. I couldn't stop, not when I was this close. The day of the final hearing arrived on a cold Tuesday in November. The courtroom was small, almost intimate. Vincent sat on one side with his lawyer, a slick man in an expensive suit, who clearly thought this would be an easy win. I sat on the other side with Patricia, wearing a simple black dress. No jewelry, no makeup. I looked exactly like what Vincent expected, a broken woman who had given up. The judge reviewed the proposed settlement. Vincent would receive all marital assets. I would receive custody of our son and minimal alimony. Vincent's lawyer smiled confidently. "Your Honor, my client is prepared to accept full responsibility for all marital assets as outlined in the agreement." Patricia leaned forward. "And the accompanying liabilities, Your Honor?" The room went silent. Vincent's lawyer blinked. "Excuse me?" Patricia slid a thick folder across the table. The complete accounting of all liabilities attached to the marital assets. Mortgages, credit lines, outstanding loans, unpaid taxes, gambling debts, nearly $2 million in total. I watched Vincent's face as his lawyer opened the folder, and that's when his world began to crumble. I will never forget the look on Vincent's face when he realized what had happened. His lawyer was flipping through the folder, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief to absolute horror. Pages and pages of debt, mortgages he didn't know existed, credit cards maxed to their limits, tax liens on properties he thought were assets. "Vincent," his lawyer whispered, his voice tight, "what is this?" Vincent grabbed the folder, scanning the documents. His face went pale, then red, then a shade of gray I'd never seen on a living person. This isn't... He couldn't even form a sentence. The judge looked between both parties, her expression unreadable. "Is there a problem, counselor?" Vincent's lawyer stood up, clearly rattled. "Your Honor, we need to postpone. We were not aware of these liabilities. There's been some kind of mistake." Patricia remained calm. "There's no mistake, Your Honor. Every document in that folder is legitimate and verifiable. Mr. Mercer has been concealing these debts from his wife and apparently from his own legal counsel for years." The judge studied the folder, flipping through pages with growing concern. "Mr. Mercer," she said slowly, "you signed an agreement stating that you wished to assume all marital assets, is that correct?" Vincent looked like a trapped animal. His eyes darted to his lawyer, to Patricia, to me. I kept my face perfectly still. I didn't know about all of this," he stammered. "My accountant handled—" "That's not what I asked," the judge interrupted. "You signed an agreement assuming all marital assets. Assets and liabilities are legally intertwined. You cannot have one without the other. Vincent's lawyer tried to intervene. Your Honor, surely there's room for renegotiation. The agreement has been signed by both parties, the judge said firmly. Mrs. Dunst has agreed to relinquish her claim to all marital assets. Mr. Mercer has agreed to assume them. The court sees no reason to alter the terms. She stamped the papers. Divorce granted as stipulated. Mr. Mercer, I suggest you consult a financial advisor immediately. The gavel came down. I walked out of that courtroom with nothing. No houses, no cars, no business, no investments. And I walked out free. Vincent chased me into the hallway, his face twisted with rage. You knew about the debt. You set me up. I turned to face him. For the first time in 15 years, I wasn't afraid. I didn't set you up, Vincent. You set yourself up. I just let you take what you asked for.
He raised his hand like he might hit me. Patricia stepped between us immediately. Touch her and you'll add assault charges to your bankruptcy filing, she said coolly. Vincent's hand dropped. He stared at me with pure hatred, but there was something else in his eyes too. Fear. This isn't over, he said through gritted teeth. But it was, and we both knew it. In the weeks that followed, Vincent's perfect life imploded. The banks started calling in their loans. Properties went into foreclosure. His business partners discovered he'd been lying about the company's finances for years. They pulled out, one by one, leaving Vincent with nothing but empty buildings and mounting lawsuits. Madison left him within a month. Turns out she wasn't interested in a broke, disgraced failure. She'd moved on to a new wealthy boyfriend before Vincent's bankruptcy was even finalized. His mother, Eleanor, tried to blame me publicly. She told anyone who would listen that I'd manipulated her son, destroyed his life, taken everything from him. But people started asking questions. How did Alexis take everything when she walked away with nothing? How did Vincent end up with all those debts? The truth came out slowly. The gambling, the hidden loans, the years of deception. Vincent's reputation crumbled. His country club membership was revoked. His so-called friends stopped returning his calls. Karen, my former best friend, tried to reach out once, a long, rambling text message apologizing for any misunderstandings. I blocked her number without responding. 6 months after the divorce, Vincent filed for bankruptcy. He lost everything, every property, every car, every trace of the empire he'd built on borrowed money and broken promises. And me? I was finally free. I used the money from my grandmother's trust to start over. I rented a small apartment near Tyler's school. I went back to work, a real job with a real salary where my contributions were actually valued. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't the life I'd imagined when I was a young bride dreaming of happily ever after. But it was mine. Tyler adjusted better than I expected. He never really knew his father anyway. Vincent had always been more of an absence than a presence. Sometimes, late at night, I think about those 15 years. The sacrifices, the humiliation, the nights I cried myself to sleep wondering what was wrong with me. And I realize nothing was wrong with me. I just loved someone who didn't know how to love anyone but himself. The best revenge wasn't destroying Vincent. He did that himself. The best revenge was walking away whole, knowing my worth, building a life where I didn't need anyone's validation to feel valuable. Last month, I ran into one of Vincent's former business partners at a coffee shop. He told me Vincent was living in a one-bedroom apartment, working a sales job he hated, still blaming everyone else for his failures. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost.
So, do you think I went too far, or did Vincent get exactly what he deserved? Let me know in the comments. If you believe people shouldn't get away with treating others like they're worthless, share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And hit that subscribe button, because trust me, there are a lot more stories like this one. Sometimes the best revenge is patience, and sometimes letting someone take exactly what they asked for is the sweetest justice of all. Until next time.